Bruchim Habayim, we are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Seng-ג, Hilchot Shabbat, and we are up to Seif Dalet and Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph of the regular prints of your Mishna Beruras. Maran writes this again, continuing in the halachot of Hadlakat Nerot Shabbat. So it says the Shulchan Aruch, Lo yakdim lemaher lehadlikom, ve'im rotzeh la'adlik ner mi'be'od yom, be'od hayom ha'gadol, ulkabel alav Shabbat miyad. He says you shouldn't do it too early, but if you want to do the Adlakat Nerot as soon as possible and accept Shabbat, Rashai, then you could do it. Ki kevan shemekabel alav Shabbat miyad, enzu hakdama. Right? If you accept Shabbat at the same time as lighting the Nerot, then you're not doing it before Shabbat, you're accepting Shabbat right now with it. So that would be allowed. In other words, normally speaking, you don't have to accept Shabbat by lighting Nerot. Now there are different communities who have different minhagim. Some people, their minhag is that they accept Shabbat by lighting the Nerot. But technically speaking, for instance, a man that lights the Ner Shabbat doesn't have to accept Shabbat by Hadlakat Nerot. Because light go to shul accepted by the Kabbalat Shabbat of the Sibur. But if you decide that I am going to light the candles and accept Shabbat by the means of doing this, that allows you, says the Shulchan Aruch, to accept Shabbat even earlier, mi be'od yom, still when it's day.
Are you referring to the person lighting or to the spouse?
Whoever is lighting.
So even if you light, you just say, I'm lighting, but I'm going to drive down to shul.
So again, for men for sure, for women becomes really questionable because of the general minhag. For instance, the Magen Avraham writes that a woman who needs to go to mikveh, right, on Friday night. So how do you do that? She has to do Hadlakat Nerot, but she also doesn't want to walk an hour. She wants to drive 5 minutes to go to the mikveh and get there before Shkia. So this Shabbat, it doesn't work for her to accept the Shabbat. So can you make a tenai, a condition, a one-time condition that this week I'm not accepting Shabbat with Hadlakat Nerot, or can you maybe not do that, right? It becomes the question. So it says, the Shulchan Aruch, ubilvat sheyeh miplag hamincha ulemala. It has to be after Plag HaMincha. What's Plag HaMincha? Plag means half. Mincha means the time of Mincha. Plag HaMincha means half of the time that you have for Mincha Ktana before Shkia. Now, how does that work? You have 2.5 hours basically for Mincha, right? For Mincha Ktana, from 9.5 hours until night, which is 12 hours after the day starts, right? Because halachically speaking, day is 12 hours always, and night is 12 hours always. The hours may change a little bit depending on summer and winter, but it's 12 halachic hours. So 2.5 hours before night is the time, the start of Mincha Ktana. It's the time of Mincha Ktana. Half of that would be 1 hour and 15 minutes, zmaniyot, halachic minutes. So that would be the time of Plag HaMincha. So from Plag HaMincha and on is when you can start accepting Shabbat upon yourself. Earlier than that, you don't want to go. You cannot accept Shabbat earlier than that. It's an hour and a quarter before night. And again, as we mentioned, this is halachic hours and minutes. The Rama adds, if you had the candles already lit from before, meaning not that you did it right now for Kavod Shabbat, but you already had lit them before Plag HaMincha, then you can't just say, oh, I have light here for Shabbat. I did it already, I had in mind for Shabbat. Can't do that. Says the Rama, you have to turn them off. Yechabenu ve'achzor ve'yadlikenu lesorach Shabbat. You go back and turn them on for Shabbat, and that would be sufficient. Now, what's the Siman of Tosefet Shabbat, by the way? We spoke about Tosefet Shabbat being a mitzvah d'oraita, perhaps. So Siman Tosefet Shabbat, the Mishna Berura writes, it's a little bit after Sof HaShkia, which again, according to the Shita of the Rabbeinu Tam versus the Gra and the Geonim that we have explained already, Sof HaShkia would be our what we call Shkia. So it would be a little bit before the Shkia. Now, again, the Biur Halacha in Siman Resh Samech Aleph explains this a little bit more at length. The Ramban, other Rishonim, is there a minimum of 2 minutes, 5 minutes before Shabbat that he would want to accept Shabbat a little earlier as Tosefet Shabbat. The Misha Poresh Asmo Mimelacha Chatzi Sha'a or Al Kol Panim Shlish Sha'a Kodem HaShkia, if you separate yourself from Melacha half an hour or 20 minutes before Shkia, Ashrei lo, fortunate is for him. That's the best way of doing it. According to all the Rishonim, again, we spoke about Sefer Yeraim, that would come out to be Chatzi Sha'ah, half an hour before Shkia. So, like 18 minutes is nice to light the candles and accept Shabbat and be done with everything. But certainly, if you do half an hour, it's even better. Fine. And says the Mishna Berura, even if you're after Plaga Mincha, you still should not do Hadlakat Nerot if you're not planning to accept Shabbat right now. You only do it early on like that if you're accepting Shabbat. אפילו אם היה אחר פלג המנחה, ומה ירשאי דלוק לעניין אחר, אבל אם הדליק לצורך שבת, אף שלא קיבל עליו שבת בהדלקתו מבעוד יום, אין צריך לכבותו. You don't need to turn it off if the only reason that you turned this candle on, you lit the candle, was for Shabbat, not that you had it in mind and whatnot, but it was Nerot Shabbat. You did mamash your Chanukia, your candelabra, your menorah Shabbat, and you did it for Shabbat, then you don't need to turn it off. After לכתחילה, לא היה לו להדליק כל כך מוקדם, even though that you should not have done so early, because it's not nikar that you did it for Sorach Shabbat. Mikol makom b'di'eved shapir dami, it is b'di'eved, fine. Okay. That basically is our Seif Dalit. Seif Hey Maran writes, Kshadik Yevarech, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Asher Kideshanu b'mitzvotav, Ve'tzivanu la'adik ner shel Shabbat. Now, this language, it is questioned by many. This is a Seif in Shulchan Aruch, Resh Samech Gimel Seif Hey, is a Seif in Shulchan Aruch that has caused a lot of ink to be spilled, many tshuvot to be written, especially in the Sephardic world, but even within the Ashkenazim, of when do you say bracha on hadlakat nerot? Because our Chazal, the Gemara says, kol mitzvot mevarech alehem over la'asiyatan. If you have birkat mitzvah, not birkat shevach, we're not talking about birkat shevach or birkat ne'enin, but birkat mitzvah, you're saying a bracha in order to do a mitzvah. And says the Gemara, kol mitzvot mevarech alehem over la'asiyatan. All of the mitzvot you should say the bracha before you do the mitzvah, and not afterwards. Aside from one exception, says the Gemara, and that is Tevilat HaGer. Right? Tevilat HaGer is the only exception, because he's not ra'ui to say bracha yet before he dunks, because he can't say Asher Kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. So it's a catch-22. Chazal were lenient for him that he dunks once, he says the bracha, dunks again. Netlat Yadayim, according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, you should say bracha before you do Netlat Yadayim. Right? You should stand there with the tefillah cup and say on Netilat Yadayim and start pouring the water, right? The reason we don't do it like that is because we assume that Stam Yadayim Shniyot, that the hands are Askaniot, they're dirty, they're Tameh, and they're not fit for you to say the bracha, and therefore you can't do it. So therefore you wash halfway, you do the mitzvah halfway before drying, because without drying the mitzvah of Netilat Yadayim is not completed. And then we say the bracha, then we dry. So this way is shtickle before the mitzvah. Same is with the bracha of Lachniso Bivrito Shel Avraham Avinu that the mohel makes, right? The father rather makes. Is that it's machloket if that's Birkat HaShevach or is Birkat HaMitzvah. According to those who this is considered Birkat HaMitzvah, you would have to say it before the Brit, right? Before the Brit. But you'll find that many, according to the Psak of Maran and the Minhag of certainly the Ashkenazim, they say the bracha right after the mohel says his bracha, right? Why is that? Why is that? Because, again, there also is a concern. But Yosef asks based on the Ramban, the Rosh, that we are concerned that this is not a mitzvah that you're doing yourself. It's a mitzvah that you're appointing a shaliach to do. How do you know? Maybe he's going to not do it. Right? Maybe you're going to make your bracha, and then he's going to take a look at the brit and say, no, this is a very specific case. It has a complication, or I'm just not feeling well now. He's going to say, no, what are you going to do? It's not in your hand, it's in his hand. So he's going to turn your bracha to bracha levatala. So therefore, you wait for him to start the brit, and then you say it right away. Now, that would be between Milah and Priya, because Amal, in the previous generations, they used to have two distinct segments of Brit Milah, two different processes. Nowadays, almost every single one of the Ma'alim does them together, Bebat Achad. Now, what is separate? You cut the foreskin, the orla, and there is a thinner layer of skin which is stuck on top of the atara. We call it ora priya, and that would be torn with the siporin, with the nails. That would be torn and bent back. That would be priya, right? Now the question is, nowadays almost all of the mu'alim, they do milah or priya bebat achat. Now if you don't do priya, the brit milah is pasul, is mal vero parak, keilu lo mal. If you did milah but not priya, it's as if you did nothing, right? So therefore, once he started the brit, and now you are making your bracha before the priya, you're good to go, because you're doing it still over lasiyatan. You're still doing it before the mitzvah is done. But I bring this up to the attention of people that according to the way the mu'alim do it nowadays, like once the mohel cuts, there is nothing to do, right? There's not much. Even if you're left with a little bit of an ora priya, that's not ma'akev. You could just bend it back and you're good to go. Therefore, it's something to speak to your local moreh hora what to do when you have a baby boy, Bezrat Hashem. But generally speaking, kol ha-mitzvot mevarech alehem over la'asiyatan b'paskin. So by Nerot Shabbat, the halacha should be that you stand there, you say bracha la'adlik ner shel Shabbat, and then you light. But what's the general prevailing minhag of the Ashkenazim and many of the Sephardi communities? Right? You light, then you cover your eyes as if you don't see the lights, right? No, I'm saying that's the minhag. It's not making fun of it. That's to do as much as we can, that I am not benefiting from the lights until I make my bracha, because again, the minhag recognizes that there is something to be reckoned with, right? So that's the minhag of the Ashkenazim and some of the Sfaradim. We'll get to that tomorrow. We'll discuss the whole saga of how did this come about? How did it become such a sensation in the modern Sephardic communities, and what should be really the halacha lema'aseh is something that Be'ezrat Hashem we will be discussing in the days to come. Chazak u'Baruch.